Hey guys, I hope you are all doing well, and I do have a topic that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this video. But first of all, if you haven't seen my last video, I posted a class introduction for a class that I'm going to be teaching on Skillshare, and I'm super excited about it. It's kind of a very large-scale project in comparison to the types of things that I typically do, so that's very exciting, and feel free to check it out if you are interested in that. So for today's video, the topic that I would like to discuss is experimentation in your artwork and how trying new things can be very beneficial to your development as an artist. And in this piece in particular, this started out as a few small sketches in my sketchbook. I did some highlighter and ballpoint pen doodles of jellyfish, and they were a lot of fun to draw, and so I wanted to do a full piece with them. And so I did some brainstorming, and I eventually came up with this concept. And it is a very tall piece in comparison to what I am used to working on. I have never done a piece in this shape before. It's 4.5 inches by 12 inches, and it is very vertical, and I like it a lot. And I tried out a few different composition thumbnail sketches before I started, and none of it was really working. But then I started to experiment a little bit more with the actual shape of the composition, and I came up with this one, and I'm really glad that I did. As a result, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about experimentation and trying new things in your artwork, including your illustration work. And I have done a lot of mixed media style artwork in the past, and there's a lot of freedom in that. And I recently have gotten back into the mixed media painting kind of things, and it's very nice to relax every once in a while and try not to stress out so much about your artwork. And I've also been trying some new techniques with my sketchbooks. I'm really trying to not overthink things so much, even though that's something I've been guilty of since before I can even remember. So this piece, I've been working a lot on watercolor paper recently, and I didn't want to use watercolor paper for this piece. I used Bristol board, and I used a micron pen that is much smaller than I typically use. It's a 005, and a little bit later on I use a 01 to define some of the line variation, I should say. And all of this was kind of an experiment, which is very exciting because it means that I am relaxing a little bit as far as my illustration is concerned. And I think it comes across in this piece. I feel like it's almost like this was a representation of how I felt, where it's the title of the piece is actually Fluid. And it's very calm and serene and very relaxed, but there's almost a loss of control there. And that's kind of what I'm trying to eventually get to in my artwork. So it's kind of a personal piece in some sense, but a very cryptic way of doing so. So getting a little more into the topic of experimentation, there are lots of different ways that you can experiment with your artwork, but I think the first and most important thing to keep in mind is there is no right or wrong with art. And people may try to tell you differently. They might try to tell you, oh, well, this is supposed to go this way. And there's something to be said about knowing how things in life are actually constructed. But there's no rule saying that you have to represent them like that in your artwork. There are hundreds of thousands of artists that would prove that. So that is an important thing to keep in mind when you're starting to experiment. And here you can see a wider view of the full piece rather than the up-close view where I was actually inking. But keeping that in mind, that idea of there is no right or wrong with art really takes a lot of the pressure off. And there are so many different ways you can experiment. In this case, I experimented with mainly a different format. I don't typically work in this size or this kind of long, dramatic, vertical style, but I like the way that it works out. But you can also experiment as far as your subject matter goes. You can experiment with new colors. You can experiment with different mediums. The ways that you can experiment are honestly endless, and there are, for the 3 or 4 that I mentioned, there's dozens more. I think the most important thing to keep in mind, besides that there's no right or wrong, is that because there is no right or wrong, there's nothing to be afraid of. And I think that's what holds us back as artists the most, is we're afraid that we're going to do it wrong. But when you approach something with no fear, or at least as little fear as you can, then there's a sense of freedom to it. It's very relaxing and soothing, and I have never done water effects like I am trying to achieve in this piece, but I was very comfortable with this piece. It was maybe it was because I think it's so personal, even it was kind of subconsciously very personal, and I think I was very comfortable with that because, things that are personal are you. So I wasn't so stressed out about it being perfect, but it turned out much nicer than I expected it to. If experimenting in large-scale pieces makes you uncomfortable, which I would not blame you, it is something that I have recently gotten better at, but for years I didn't really do finished full pieces on separate sheets of paper. I worked almost exclusively in sketchbooks for most of my life up until now. And the moment that I started experimenting with more finished pieces was very scary. It was more of a pressure to do it right, but I feel like I'm slowly but surely getting over that, which is why I'm trying to share these tips with you, because it really is a freeing experience once you get to that point. But if you are uncomfortable with experimenting to this extent in full finished pieces, feel free to experiment in your sketchbooks. And I've recently been working on a different way of sketchbooking than I typically do, merging it with more of my planning ideas. I used to have planning areas and then more sketchbook where I would practice drawing specifically, but I've recently started to merge the two, and I feel like it's a much better representation of the way my brain works, which is nice. If you have an idea but you're not sure how it's going to turn out, a sketchbook is a really really great place to work on something like that. Do some small little thumbnail sketches, which I'm considering doing a video on in the future. I think that in the end, it's very relaxing and it's very freeing and it's very nice to not stress about things so much. And I am really, really, really good at this. I'm really, really, really good at stressing out about things. And I think I've talked about this before in past videos, but it's a really nice feeling when you don't have to do that. So I encourage you to just play around a little bit, try some new things, and see what happens. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you haven't seen the last video, check it out. And this piece is available for purchase in my Etsy shop, and there will be a link in the description. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.